Here we go. Welcome to another edition of Recruiters with No Limits, always live and never scripted. I'm here with my sidekick and co-host, John Ruffini. Johnny, what's up, brother?
What's going on, Richard?
Hey, not much, man. We are in a full swing of spring. But hey, I got to tell you, John, did you change your clothes from last night?
Did I change my clothes from last night? I did. Why?
Okay, because what's our topic today, man? Change.
Oh, I was like, where are you going with this, Richard?
Always.
This supposed to be a family program, man. Come on.
Oh, see that? Always below the belt. No, all joking aside, our guest today, John, are you ready for this? It's the high energy Amy from Painted Porch Strategies.
Hello.
The Change Navigator.
That's right. That's right. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I am so excited to talk to you today about one of my most passionate and favorite topics, change. Because obviously, just like with you, John, in your clothes, if you don't change every once in a while, it starts to smell. It gets a little.
Warning, high energy tonight on this show. High energy for sure. So,
I love it.
I love it. So, Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick. Give us like the 2-minute tour of you.
All right. I'll time myself. So I've been in the healthcare staffing industry since all the way back in 2004. I know I did it when I was 10. That's when I started. But I started in healthcare staffing, and over the years, I've emerged. I started as a recruiter and a staffer, and then I moved over to the software side of things, working for 2 ATSs, helping them design new solutions and products to help serve the healthcare staffing community. And a couple years ago, I decided, you know what? I think there's an opportunity. I think there's a little bit of a gap here that needs to be filled to help these organizations be much more successful when they go through these big digital or organizational changes. And so I decided to found my little company, my proud little company, Painted Porch Strategies, where I am, as you said, I have many titles because when you have your own company, you can do whatever the hell you want. So I am the Change Navigator, I am the Chief Evolution Officer, and whatever else, Mission Co-Pilot, whatever you want to call me, I'm here for you.
Oh, my.
So first and foremost, and I mentioned this before we went on the air, I had to ask that. Where did Painted Porch come from? Where'd the name come from?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll ask you first. When you think of a porch, what do you think of?
I think of sitting on a rocking chair, enjoying a beverage in the afternoon sun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, some of our greatest experiences and connections happen on porches. They're places where we can gather with other people, whether it's friends, family, our neighbors, our coworkers. We can share, we can collaborate, we can sometimes have some heated debates. But at the end of the day, we can walk away having had a wonderful experience with one another shared on a porch. The Painted Porch is actually a nod to what we base a lot of our training and methodology on, which is based on the philosophy of Stoicism. So Stoicism was one of the philosophies back in the day. The big OG is Marcus Aurelius. You may have heard of him if you've ever seen Gladiator. Great, R.I.P. Richard Harris. So if you've ever seen that, but Stoicism is basically this idea that we are all here just trying to do our best, as opposed to some of the other philosophies that were out there where it's like trying to reach this level of enlightenment that is almost impossible. Stoicism was the philosophy of the streets. It was the philosophy of the people. And instead of having a formal school where you had to be of a certain class or financial level within the ancient world of Greece and Rome, this was a place where anyone of any class, of any status could come and join. They joined on something that was called a painted porch. It was an open forum where people of all races, genders, classes could join. They could share, they could debate, they could challenge, and they could grow together.
What a great history lesson.
I feel like a philosopher, guys.
There's a quiz later. I should have told you. There's a pop quiz later, but we'll get to that.
Okay, so I got to show the porch, John. Check this porch out. That's what I'm talking about.
That's a painted porch.
It's a painted porch. It's a vibrant place for people to gather and join. Yep.
It's all about the beach vibe there, for sure.
So, Amy, you've been involved you mentioned you helped develop or create some ATSs. And as we're all recruiters, we've all worked on various ATSs. And it's always a challenge when you're at a company and say, okay, great, we're moving to a new platform. And all of a sudden, especially your most successful recruiters, they're like, oh no, this is working just fine. You have to keep this active just for me. Everybody else can change to it. Take us through situations like that. And how are we supposed to navigate that?
Well, thankfully you have a change navigator here with you to help explain that. So one of the key things, one of the foundational components is understanding that change ultimately at the end of the day is an individual action. We think about change so often in an organization as the thing. It's the thing that we're moving to. It's the thing that we're changing, that we're introducing, that thing, that ATS, this new operational process, whatever it is. But truly, change is a personal endeavor first and foremost. And it's those people that are going to make or break it. So to your question about how do you navigate when you have someone that is really digging their foot in, I say first and foremost, embrace their feedback. We can fight them on it, but there's a reason behind it. And it's not as black and white or clear cut as you think. There's a reason that they're fighting it. And oftentimes it's because there's some deep-seated fear, uncertainty of how it's going to impact them or how it's going to affect them and their ability to be successful. So first off, just meet with them, talk to them, try to dig a little bit deeper, ask better questions to understand maybe what it is that is holding them back. One of the things we like to talk about is that there's really a couple different, let's say, personas or styles of people and how they approach change. There are people who are very much conservative. There has to be a really, really, really good reason, and you have to really prepare your argument or your presentation well in order to convince them. There's people that are just like Richard and you that are like, yes, change, do it. I want to disrupt. Let's make it. Let's try new things. They're originators. They always want to seek new change. And then there are people that are a little bit more like me. They're more practical. And they're like, well, change, yes, but let's weigh it. Let's measure and see where it makes sense and maybe where we don't need to just throw it all out and start from scratch. So I think it starts with just understanding that there's different types of personalities when it comes to change, but also recognizing that change is happening here and here first and foremost.
Man, good stuff. So Amy, I got a stat here that you put out there. Over 70% of change efforts fail. Only 2.5 actually exceed their goals. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we suck at change. Let's just put it out there. And I think we've all been involved. Well, it's like I said, I had a conversation with an executive a couple weeks ago where he said change sucks and so do people. And it's like, well, change can be a struggle, but the truth is we fight it every day, but it's something that happens to us every day. Every day we change in some way. We're growing and evolving, even if it's tiny little ways. We are changing. We just don't see it. It's not this big thing necessarily that's happening all the time. But yes, over 70%. And I think from my perspective, from my porch perspective, I think a lot of it has to do with how we think about change. Like I said before, a lot of times when we think of change management, everybody goes, yes, change management. We need change management. We need to train our people. We need to communicate our why. Okay, that's great. But if you're starting there, you're already behind the 8 ball because, again, change is an individual. It's a personal thing. It's what happens within each of us emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically. That's really where change starts for everyone. And if you're starting that change conversation, you're starting that change effort at training them on how to use a new system, you're going to stumble. And I think that's really where a lot of the reason why so much of change efforts fail is because they're just looking at it as part of a project plan. They're not treating it as something that is part of the organizational culture and a mindset that you start to build and cultivate. So that way you're always thinking about those innovative ways to move forward. It's not something that's a fear. It's actually it's an opportunity.
So yeah, that rings true. I'm just recalling some experiences, and a lot of times they're never tapping into, what's in it for the people, the why behind the change, and what it's going to do for the company or the people, and how it's going to make their lives better or more productive, help them make more money, whatever it is. It's always been, hey, we're looking at some new software, and then, hey, we got it, so you'll be trained, and we're shifting over on this date, and we're getting rid of the old one. And that's, to your point, now it makes perfect sense why that creates so much panic and unrest, because people don't feel included at all.
Right. Think about it this way. Think if you were going on a trip, right? But you had no involvement whatsoever in the planning. And let's say Richard just showed up at your house one day. He's like, hey, hop in the car. We're going to go on a trip for the next 30 days. You're going to be like, what? He's like, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it. I've already got the map. I planned it all out. I just need you to grab some clothes and come with me. Like, that's disruptive. How would you react? Well, he would want you to change your clothes. Yeah, he doesn't. You're in a car together. It's gonna,
it's gonna be necessary.
So it's think about it like that way, and I think that's very often the way the receivers of the change often can perceive that, even if they're excited, even if John or Richard came in and said, "Hey, you know what? Come on, jump in the car. We're gonna go to, I'll use Arizona. We're gonna go to the Grand Canyon. Wow, that's so cool. I've never seen the Grand Canyon." But at the same time, you're like, I can't just hop in a car right now and do this. I need to prepare a little bit. I need to prepare myself. I need to prepare my life. I need to prepare my, the other people. I need to let them know I'm going to be gone for 30 days, right? It's thinking about that. It's that preparation. And I think so much that preparation, we shortcut it a little too much. And we think if we just tick these boxes of, yep, we got our why out. We explained the why. We created a state of urgency, which I actually don't think is a good idea. But anyways, we stated our why. We repeated it often. We gave them training. Why aren't they adopting this change? Why are they fighting it so much? It's because we haven't given them the space and grace and training and time to be able to process the change and understand how to process the change that's happening, that they're experiencing within themselves.
Is it safe to say in your experience that even in the best scenarios of managing change in an organization, no matter how much you follow the roadmap and the methodology, no matter how much you communicate it and prepare and communicate that change readiness, there's still going to be some outliers that are just for the sake of resisting or going to resist?
Yeah, absolutely. There are going to be. And like I said, I think that you welcome them to the table. You don't welcome them to the table to be the Debbie Downer and like, wah, wah, here's all the things, here's all the reasons why this is not going to work. But
great.
At the same time,
that was like Charlie Brown. I swear to God, I have to say that. I thought it was like, oh, what? All right, sorry, Amy. Go ahead. That was a commercial break.
That's okay. Wah, 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 wah. Sometimes I feel like that's what my husband thinks when I'm talking. But anyways, but as I was, where was I going with this? Oh, when it comes to those detractors, right, as we like to call them. Like I said, welcome them to the table, because one of the great things about them is often they are giving you cues and clues as to what you need to start thinking about, how you can anticipate, and what you maybe need to be mindful of to address these change issues down the road. They're actually giving you a lot of great feedback that you're just choosing. You're harshing my vibe, man. Instead of this, actually do this, and welcome them to have those conversations. So that way, even together, by inviting them in and saying, you know what, how can we solve this? How do you think we can solve this? How can we address this? That actually gives them a little bit more skin in the game too.
Love that.
Yep. I do love it. And Amy, do you think a lot of leaders assume you're going to accept the change without asking?
Of course. You know what assuming does, right? We all know that.
Doesn't end up good.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I think Tony Randall talked about that at some point. But yes, we definitely don't want to assume. And that's the thing. They think, well, you know what? I'm a good leader. My team trusts me. They're going to go along with it. But even if you have a lot of trust within your team or your organization, which is, sometimes a little iffy. But even if you do have that trust, again, individual impact, individual mindset. it is going to impact each person differently, as much as they even want to come along for the ride. Sometimes we don't recognize where we're tripping ourselves up, and we don't even have the awareness to recognize it.
I had this vision of a CEO just telling their management team, look, this is what we're doing, so make sure your teams are on board. And that doesn't work today.
No.
And then at 2 o'clock, they just leave the office and say, see you next week.
Yeah. Like, that didn't go over as well as I thought it would. Yeah.
Right.
Great news, everyone. Yeah. Now go forth and spread the cheer. Spread the message. Mm-hmm.
So Amy, I got to ask you, do you have a story you can tell us about, like a leader, how you had to convert them over to this change?
Oh, well, that's, I will say that I try to do it a little stealthily, where I just kind of weave it in sometimes. For example, there was a client a couple years ago that was going through a digital transformation. And I kind of gave them the heads up that, hey, when we go through our discovery calls and some of these, operational future state designs that we're doing, just a heads up, I might do some weird stuff at the beginning. But the great thing was, so they kind of didn't have a choice because I was running the meeting and they needed to be there and they already invested all this time and money into it. So then I just kind of kamikaze them with some of my more weird things, which are really focused on just getting into the right mental and mindful state. So, one of the big things when you think about these big changes, especially with digital transformations, you're asking people to make big decisions and to think very critically about what they're doing today and think differently about how they can do it tomorrow. And in order to do that, you need them to be fully present and energized in order to make that happen. So I borrow a lot of what we do from our Chief Joy Officer on the Painted Porch and our mindfulness coach, Sierra. Again, when you have your own company, you come up with your fun names. And she is a mindfulness expert. She's been doing this for almost 15 years. And so we borrow a lot of what she brings to these meetings. So right at the beginning, we're doing things like laughter yoga. We are doing some mindfulness, some desk yoga, some movement. So that way, when we are in the meeting, we are energized, we're present, we're active, we're not thinking about what we just came from or thinking about where we need to go next. We are here in this meeting ready to make these big decisions and move this change forward in a meaningful way.
So, and I imagine that sets a tone for something that we want to talk with you about, sets the tone for open collaboration. Yeah. And that's not always what it seems. What's your definition of collaboration?
Oh, what's my definition of collaboration?
Oh, drum roll.
I know. I got to think about that for a minute. I would just say what collaboration is and what it is not.
Okay.
Collaboration is not just occasionally slacking one another to give them an update of what you're doing or to ask them a question. That's not effective collaboration. Collaboration is actually working together and establishing and reinforcing regularly a shared goal, a shared mission, and shared objectives. And that's really a big thing that we focus on in our teams training and coaching that we do, is you actually as a team coming up with your team, I'll say your team mantra, right? Your team rallying cry. Hell, if you want to, back at the software company that I worked at, each team, they created their own banner. Like they had their own almost like shields that they created to represent who they were as a team. Because so often we say team, but we really mean me, with some occasional times that I bug someone else to help me with something.
Yeah, totally I once saw a training video and the guy said, oh, collaboration. That's when you tell me what you want done and I do it.
I grew up in Florida. I'll say bless his heart.
So we talk about change, Amy. So here's one I always say. We talked about titles. Do you go in and say, stop these titles? I mean, come on, seriously, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be a VP or something. Just get a title you like.
Listen, if that's important to you, great. You know what? If it's important to you, if it has meaning to you to have a certain title, then go for that if you want to. But I prefer looking at just skills. What can, as a team, what can people do? In fact, I think it's one of the greatest untapped resources that most companies, but I'll say staffing agencies especially, that they're shortcutting themselves with these titles, with these boxes that they are putting people in. I prefer looking at things more from a project or a needs-based approach, as opposed to, this is my role, this is my lane, this is what I fit in, this is what I do. Because especially, staffing is like this. It's like, so there's the really high, there's the really great times, and then there's the really low times. And so often with that, we see all the time right now where, especially in tech, there's these massive layoffs that are happening everywhere. And instead of trying to define people into their one given box, let's actually let people thrive. Let's let people flourish and fulfill and do the things that fill them up and tap into their talents. Maybe you have a recruiter who also is just amazing with marketing. Use them in that way. Or maybe you have someone who's in payroll, but you know what? They are aces with, customer relations. Find a way to blend. Use your resources in a clear way. And if you're like, oh, well, we have our job codes and there's salaries tied to them, then try something different. Just think about it differently, and maybe just base it on the project that they're doing or the skill set that they have, and just start adding those pieces on, like stacking them up like a club sandwich.
I love that. You know what? My terminology is plug and play, Jonah. I say that all the time. Just plug them in and play it. Let them go.
A company's best asset is their people. And, one thing we try very hard to strive where I am currently is, we might have the right person for the company, but they're just in the wrong role. And if we identify that, then let's figure out what they want to do and what they're passionate about. And it doesn't mean that, oh, you failed in this role, so get out. It means, okay, this might not be for you. Let's see if there's something else, because that culture is something that is very hard to develop. And once you have it, if you find someone that blends in with that culture, find a place for them, utilize their talents, 100%. To your point, leverage the strengths.
I would say probably all of us at some point in our life left a job because we just didn't see where we fit in anymore into that 100%. Box, right? And I know I have in the past where I'm like, this is the role I'm told I'm supposed to be doing. I know I'm good at it, but it doesn't get spark. As Sierra would say, it's not sparky for me. It doesn't light me up. And so
spark joy.
It doesn't spark joy. Exactly. It doesn't spark joy. And so I went through, it's actually one of the reasons I created Painted Porch. I just went through and started thinking, okay, what are all the things I'm good at? What do I actually like doing that I'm good at? What do I not really enjoy doing that I'm good at? And what does that look like? And how could that actually, be something and serve people in a really meaningful way, but in a different way than maybe what they're used to in the past when you think about a traditional either change management or even an operational consultant. That's why we don't have consultants. That's nowhere in our titles anywhere. We just come up with something completely different because we want it to be what it needs to be with the client or with the person that we're serving.
So true. And take a point on that. Even with me, I got burnout with other companies just saying, you can only do this much. Can you imagine that? They're telling the shark, this is all you can do. I can't do anything else. They're like, you can't do only 2 posts a week on social media. Stop it. So I'm like, see ya. But I got to ask you, so conquer burnout. Here's one we got to talk about with the change, the burnout. How many people get burnout? The leaders don't know and they just disappear.
Yeah, well, thank you. You set me up perfectly. So tomorrow, ASA, if you're a member of ASA, myself and my Chief Joy Officer, Sierra, who's amazing and wonderful. I consider her my Mary Poppins. She just has these magical gifts. But we are doing a talk all about addressing burnout with your employees. It's tomorrow. It's part of the engineering, IT, and scientific group, but anyone who's a member can join. And we would love to have you join. But yes, the latest stats when I was looking at it in preparation for that, it's something like 41% of people have reported experiencing some form of burnout, feelings of burnout within the last year. And it costs the US economy $300 billion a year, workplace-related stress.
Wow.
And yes, that's a good chunk of change, right? So burnout is a big deal. Now, granted, we could debate what is or is not burnout, and is it really burnout or not, but who cares? That person is experiencing something that they feel is burnout. And to your question, Richard, how many are there? there's a lot more than you think. And one of the main reasons why is because you're not really asking. You're not really asking. You haven't set up. Sometimes you don't ask the questions you don't want the answer to. So maybe you're just, head in the sand ostrich, but you're not really asking. Or you haven't set up the right system or methodology in place to allow people to feel comfortable to come to you to share. I'm struggling. I need some help.
Exactly right. Well, we know that in the staffing industry, some of these companies, they burn and turn. I got to be frank. I worked with companies, just burn and turn, just number. After a while, your body's just going, you're going to say, I'm out of here.
Yeah. You can't. There's and beyond the feeling of it, beyond the overwhelm of or the I can't even that you might be experiencing, there are some real physical impacts to it as well. And so as much as recruiting is a sales game, a lot of it, and there are so many recruiters that are almost, I don't know how they do it. That's why I'm not a recruiter anymore, to be honest. But, they're on their phones, they're 24/7. That's not sustainable. And it's actually not going to allow them to be an effective recruiter. Because I think, Richard, you and I were talking, recruiting is part sales, but I actually think most of what you do is a counselor. You're a counselor, you're an advisor, and you can't fill someone else's cup if yours is completely empty.
Wow, what a great point.
Love it.
Yeah.
So how do we build this trust? Because that's one of the big ones I got to talk about real quick. Trust. Trust, right? In everything we do.
Oh, trust. It's a mother. Let me tell you.
It's a organizational trust. Boy.
Yeah. Organizational trust is the foundation for everything, pretty much. If you don't have trust within your organization or within your teams or across the different levels within your company, anything that you try to do is just gonna crash and burn. The way that we do it is we actually ask. Again, you never know. You're not going to know unless you ask. Yes, I could go and I could roam your office and I could get a vibe and a sense of it, right? But really the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the data. And so through that, one of the first things that we do with any client that we work with is we do an operational assessment. We evaluate the health of your organization. Because like I said, any change you want to do, even if it's something really small, it is going to fail if you do not have that trust established. Because them and their interests and their success, you're just looking at the bottom line. Like, what was it? I think it was yesterday or day before, there was that CEO that was all over social media for basically telling everybody, oh, so you didn't get your bonus, quit the pity party. It's like,
how crazy was that?
That's not that. I would say she wasn't her best self on that day. She maybe could use a little emotional intelligence assessment and coaching from the Painted Porch.
Please, Amy, reach out to her. Reach out.
I think I might. But yeah, so we start by doing an organizational health assessment, and we ask, we evaluate over 6 different areas within your organization. We measure how the individual feels about themselves. What's their mindset? How do they feel they're showing up? How successful do they feel in their job? How do they feel they are with their team? Are they actually collaborating, or are they just a team in name only? How are they working with their operations? Do they feel that they have the tools and methods that are going to help them be successful? Do they have trust in their organization? And how change ready are they? We use all of that to measure, to say, listen, whatever you want to do, we want to help you get there. We know that there's an opportunity for you to change and to grow and to innovate, but it's not going to happen until you work on these 6 core areas. And one of the biggest ones is trust.
Wow.
Yeah.
There it is. Woo, man. Hey, Amy, before we wrap it up, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Any final thoughts you want to give out there to everybody?
Oh my goodness. I would just say, I've said it and I'll say it again, that change is not a project that you manage. It's actually a mindset that you cultivate. It's a culture that you can create within your organization. One of the things we like to say is my goal when I work with clients is that eventually you're not going to need me, because you are going to have what I would say are your own in-house set of consultants and change innovators within your organization. And it's through the training and the coaching that you'll have that culture where change is something that people are excited about, that they're always looking for. Is there a way I could do this better? What could make this, what could just, to use a Disney term, how could I plus this? How could I plus this just a little bit more to help serve my clients, serve my candidates, serve our organization? And so that's the big thing. I always love, I laugh now when I hear CEOs say, well, we need to have everybody back in the office because it's part of our culture. No, that's bullshit. If you need people in your office in order to have a good culture, I would actually counter that. I would say you can create a culture regardless of proximity to one another by investing in the tools and the resources and the training and the coaching to help your people operate at their best for themselves and for each other.
Man, well said. Johnny, wrap it up, brother.
This has been awesome, Amy. Thanks so much for taking time out. You know, it just drilled the point home that to impart change in an organization, I love the fact that if you want, whether it's large or small, you've got to have the trust from the top down, and you've got to get buy-in from your people. And ultimately, you want to have a culture that embraces change because, hey, let's face it, if there's one constant we can count on, it's change.
And people. I'll just add one more thing. One of my favorite quotes from Zig Ziglar. He says, "You don't have a business. You have people, and people are your business. They build your business." So keep that in mind when you think about any change or anything that you're doing within your organization. You will not have it without your people and their ability to work and operate and feel their best. There
it is. And me and John next week, we're going to change because we'll have different clothes on for sure.
Good. If not, I was going to say something.
All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining in. We'll see you next week on another episode. Take care.
Take care.